And it is the first Thursday in March of 2016, which is kind of fun. Thursdays are always good days. And at this point, I have attained 7 decades of survival here on the material realm. So,
Wow, congratulations.
yes,
Is it your birthday?
March 1st.
Oh,
So,
happy birthday, man. That's awesome.
well, thank you. Yes, I feel like, I am the Energizer Bunny. I just keep coming back over and over again. So we'll see if I can keep this up for an extended run. Be nice to be doing a video on my 120th birthday and have completed some of the projects that I've got lined up for myself here.
Oh, but by your 120th birthday, it'll be a hologram. We'll be recording in 3D and broadcasting into people's living rooms like we're sitting on their couch.
That would be very cool, actually. I may hang around just to be able to experience that. And of course, the Course in Miracles tells us that life is a choice, and so is death. And I definitely can attest to that, having died a couple of times in this lifetime. Coming back from that dark sleep is always a bit of a challenge. The last time was with pneumonia, and it got really grisly a few years back. And it took me 6 months to fully settle back into this reality. And I still have some experiences that I share with people that I know closely, but I don't broadcast. But it is interesting how bouncing between these different realms, we begin to realize that it's all states of consciousness and has absolutely nothing to do with physicality.
Mm-hmm.
When Jesus said, "Lazarus, get the hell out of that tomb," he was giving us a very profound lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very common belief in the world that the world and the body gives rise to the mind. But the Course says, no, that's backwards. That's backwards. The mind gives rise to all of it, gives rise to the body, gives rise to the brain. And I think Jesus was demonstrating with Lazarus that the mind can make that choice. And I think it seems to require someone who's kind of ready for it. And I think Lazarus was ready to have that understanding that, okay, there's nothing really going on here. And
When you're, having to climb back out of those wrappings, the shrouds of death, it is an interesting process because you start to really look at the world around you through eyes that are ready to forgive. You may not wake up completely in a space of being able to forgive, but at least you're more willing to consider the possibility of, what if I just stopped judging and condemning and being embittered and just glided along, just enjoyed the day, just enjoyed the flowers in the field and the birds in the heavens and that sort of thing.
yeah, you hear like your story, other people's stories of these sort of like turning points. It might not mean you're at the end of your journey, but something significantly has changed. And from there on out, life is never quite the same. There's never quite the same pull into it that it used to have. And yeah, I think it's inspiring to hear that kind of thing.
Well, it definitely is coming from a lot of different directions. The amount of documentation from people who have experienced this in a multitude of different ways. For me, it was just blackness, just gone. 2 weeks of missing time. But other people have, experiences that they share about having met people that they had a longing to see once again who had transitioned over. And so it comes in a multitude of different formats. And The ones that you probably stumble across in the course of your life are the ones that you should stop and look at more intensely, because they are signals from that higher level of consciousness trying to get you to look at your life and the minute by minute, hour by hour experience of being here, as well as being at home in God, just having an odd dream.
And it is a little odd.
But, it's just a matter of time until the odd get even.
All right, I can't resist it. It's one of my favorite elementary school jokes. Why was 6 afraid of 7?
I have no idea.
Because 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Oh my God. That's a horrific image. Cannibalism in the in the realm of numbers. That's unthinkable. It's almost as bad as the politics are this year.
All right. Well, maybe that's the time for us to segue into our reading for today, which is number 23 in the manual. This is, does Jesus have a special place in healing? And as we were kind of just talking before we got started here, that I think one of the thrusts of this section is that, yeah, Jesus is a useful symbol, because especially for us in the West, he's probably the biggest symbol of love, of kindness, of forgiveness, of healing. And I think he's also pointing us beyond all symbols. So it's not that it's wrong to use symbols, but as we use them, we can even realize that eventually that too will dissolve. The Course itself really is just a tool. It's not the culmination of the journey. It's just the way for us to get there. And similarly, the symbol of Jesus is a tool that we can use. We can call on Jesus. We can ask for help in the areas of our lives that we're having trouble with feeling upset or feeling unfairly treated. And we can shift into a new perspective. But we do have the ability to see that that's not the end of the journey. It's just a step along the path.
Exactly. It's the universal Jesus, which is, the Christ, that is the totality of all of God's creation. And there are millions who embrace a variety of other images around that. Of course, the Buddhists are probably the most prevalent from the Eastern philosophies, but any symbol that brings through forgiveness, compassion, and love is going to work for you. So you're not confined to just that aspect of Jesus. But I like the idea of getting past my tendency to see people as their ego by constantly reminding myself, oh, the bus driver of the bus that just cut me off in traffic here is actually Jesus. Jesus is driving that bus. And then it's a lot easier to forgive everybody that we encounter in this world and not walk away embittered and carrying that negativity and that hatred. So Jesus becomes a symbol for us on a lot of different levels. And he most, assuredly does have a tremendous impact in healing, simply because if we see our enemies as Jesus struggling with an ego like we're struggling with an ego, then it opens that door of receptivity up for us. And it gives us the allowance to step out of the anger, the frustration, and the hatred that that goes along with all of our judgments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that part of this section really speaks to that, as it's talking about Jesus doesn't see himself as separate from God. And then he says, what does this mean for you? It means that in remembering Jesus, you are remembering God. The whole relationship of the Son to the Father lies in him. So just like you're saying, when you see that Christ in everyone around you, you're actually starting to see it in yourself. And you can't help but see your brother as you see yourself, and vice versa. So it's a really good exercise. I like the one that you're sharing about really trying to see that everywhere you go, because it does soften the blow. It does help us realize, no, we're all in this together. And he goes on here and says, his part in the sonship is also yours, and his completed learning guarantees your own success. Is he still available for help? What did he say about this? Remember his promises and ask yourself honestly whether it is likely that he will fail to keep them. Can God fail his Son? And can one who is one with God be unlike him? Who transcends the body has transcended limitation. Would the greatest teacher be unavailable to those who follow him? Obviously, the answer is no. He is always
Yes.
here for us.
And it goes on, to give us a huge insight in this fourth paragraph that I really, really love. It says, the name of Jesus Christ as such is but a symbol, but it stands for love that is not of this world. Wow. The love of this world is like the tides of the ocean. It comes in, it goes out, shifts around, turns into a tsunami. We get washed, away in it. But it's ephemeral because it's based on our attaching the idea of love to a personality, to an ego that we are either attracted to or trying to placate. And in reality, true love transcends all of that in a very magnificent way and never turns on you. It's always full bore available to all of us. And that is the love that we really, in the depths of our soul, are seeking to recognize within ourselves and recognize within our surroundings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's a timelessness about what is true. And I think we can use these sort of ideas as helpful kind of guideposts along the way, that what is true is eternal, it is unchanging, it is complete and boundless love. And if it's not that, it's not real. And it really helps us to see very clearly what is real. And it helps us to stop attaching to the things that are temporal, that do come and go. We can still enjoy the things here in this world, but we grip onto them less tightly. We're less bothered when things don't seem to go our way. And we can kind of sort of like surf the waves here, because we know that there aren't any real sharks. We don't need to worry about crashing and falling off, because there's no real problem here. It just seems like there is, and that's kind of a hard idea for us to get. But what it points to is, it points to the real issue. And the real issue is not anything that is happening here in your life. It's not the problems that you think are causing you pain. What it really always is about is our belief that we are not one with God. This idea of the separation is the deep root under every problem and issue that shows up in our life. And seeing that helps us to go back to where the issue is, so that we can sort of unplug our belief in it. And bit by bit, we do that until we're completely unplugged. And when we're unplugged from that belief, then we're automatically plugged in to our knowledge of God, to our realization of truth. And that's the path that we're all walking. That's the journey that we're all on together.
Exactly. And it's, pardon me, it's the ability to see beyond the body. Because as long as we are fixated on the body, we are the most vulnerable beings in the universe. But as soon as we start to identify with our spiritual identity, then all of a sudden we gain that extra edge of invulnerability. We become fearless in that we realize that, yeah, you can destroy the body, but that's not me. So take your best shot. And I think that's really at the core of all the fear that I'm watching as, this presidential season amps up, is that everybody is afraid, and that fear is based on their physicality, their body. Oh, I won't have food. I won't have a roof over my head. This guy's going to, mess up my retirement. This guy's going to mess up my income. This guy's going to deport me. Whatever it is, we really have to look at the truth. And the truth is that while the physical realm may become inconvenient for us, it certainly is not a thing that we need take seriously. And as we live more and more in that state of the awareness of our invulnerability, that filters through into the material world. And so we can step into, the lion's den, as Daniel did back in the Old Testament, and be the fearless example of the eternal nature of life, the flame that is never subdued, the flame that never goes out.
Oh, that's a great image. Yeah, because the flame doesn't ever go out. It's impossible that it goes out, because it is all that is. And this idea of darkness is really this idea that the light could end, or that the light has a limit. And again, these ideas are dualistic, and they have no real place in that oneness. They have no real room. How is it possible that there's something else other than everything? And that's the sort of silly idea that gave rise to all this. And as we start to gently laugh at it, as we start to see it less seriously and more like, wow, I don't really want to keep going there, then it does have a shift. And the shift is that we wear our identity almost like a costume. And we start realizing more and more that this costume is not the truth of what we are. I heard a teacher talking about this, and he was saying it's a little like having like a Batman costume. And if you wear this Batman costume at Halloween, you can have fun with it. You can kind of do whatever. But if you start actually believing that you are Batman, that's where the problems come in. And in a sense, that's what we've all done. We've made up this costume. We made up this individual identity. And then we put it on, and we bought into it. We bought into it so much that when someone, say, insults Barrett, I feel hurt. I think they're talking about me. But they're just like, if someone picked on Batman while you were wearing a costume, you could just kind of say, well, whatever, I'm not really Batman. We can start to do that in our lives too. We can start to say, well, sure, you're talking about what's happening here in this physical world, but is that really what I am? And just that planting that seed of doubt and the ego's seeming certainty, it starts to change our experience. It starts to soften the blows that fall upon us here, and it starts to help us realize it doesn't have to hurt as much as it seemed to before.
Yes, we arrive at that point where we can step out of the way of every bullet and cannonball that is headed toward us. And within that, again, it goes back to that sense of empowerment. The more transparent we are, the less we're attached to our physicality. It becomes increasingly easy um, to negotiate the walk in the material realm, because then you never fall into that error of having to defend yourself. And defensiveness is something that really can poison your experience of life in all directions, because you're always in fight or flight. So as we reach out to that image of Jesus and watch how he, expressed himself in all of his trials and in all of his tribulations, he was he was the person who was the least inclined to fall into a defensive posture, and he walked through the world in a state of casual awareness of everything that was really going on. When the tax man showed up and said, "You guys owe us a ton of money," he turned around and picked up a fish and pulled the coin out of the fish's mouth. And that gives us, whether you take that literally or not, that gives us the idea of living in a state of grace and living in a state of recognizing that the needs are met before we even recognize the needs is a very empowering aspect, a secondary effect of working with the Course in Miracles.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a little bit more in here that really kind of fits right in, and it says, "No one who has become a true and dedicated teacher of God forgets his brothers, yet what he can offer them is limited by what he learns himself. Then turn to one who laid all limits by and went beyond the farthest reach of learning. He will take you with him, for he did not go alone, and you were with him then, as you are now." And I think that's really saying that we awoke when Jesus awoke. We all awoke together to our true self. And if that doesn't seem to be our experience here in time, it's only a matter of time before it becomes our experience. And it's really reassuring to me that it's all done already. We don't have a goal that needs to be strived for and achieved. Love is. There's nothing else. We don't have to fight a monster in order to achieve, rescue the princess and become the the noble knight. We already have done all of that, and we already are worthy of God's love. There's nothing that needs to be done in order to prove that worthiness. We just need to let go of all the ideas that say that we're not. And that is the journey without distance, as Jesus says.
Yes, it is remarkable how we can trick ourselves into that state of discomfort and frustration and fear. And the reality is that we're just having a very lucid dream that is a memory. And in fact, we have already transcended all of these challenges, and we have finished up the adventure with a glorious outcome. And that is part of the consistency factor of the Course. The more you loop back into that, the more you recognize that, the more it creates a consistent way of living, a consistent way of expressing life. So it can become a very easy journey as you realize that the journey's already over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it speaks to this idea that if we're consistently gentle with everything that comes up in our life, sometimes there are really hard things we're going through. But if we're very gentle and kind and patient with ourselves, we'll get through it all. And that inevitability of awakening to God's love is a nice way for us to end our journey.
It is.
Yeah.
And speaking of journeys, we have got the next Course in Miracles group meeting here on the South Side at Transformation coming up on the 20th, I believe it is, of March, right a week before Easter. And that's going to be a really good time to check out, this growing and expanding Southside community. The period when we're stepping into the season of lilies and recognizing that symbol of the cross, the scariness, the hideousness of it, that's not what Jesus was all about. He said, this is this is the dark side of the material realm, but the truth is that you can't put any of us down, that we are the eternal expression of God.
I love that. I love that a lot. Yeah. It's all about awakening and rebirth and life, and not about suffering and death. And I think most of Christianity kind of went down the wrong path on that one, but Jesus never left, and he's still teaching and guiding us to help us to know that only that open-heartedness, only that fullness of joy and happiness is his real message. And it's never left us. Just like as Chris is riding down the street, that bus driver never leaves him alone.
Yes, I am preparing myself for this evening's adventures. I go to pick up my daughter-in-law, and once again get cut off by my brother Jesus driving that bus.
Love you, Jesus. Just stop cutting Chris off, okay?
Yes, well, sometimes I need to be cut off just to be brought back to the present moment, perhaps. I don't know. The more we surrender the experiences of our lives to the Holy Spirit, the more he takes those, or she takes those, or however you want to format it, the more it takes those experiences and turns them into opportunities for us to ascend above this mortal realm.
All right, well, we'll just hanging with the angels, watching it all go by.
That is the plan, and it's working. That's the good news. It is working.
Well, this has been a really good talk, Chris, and I look forward to our talk next week when, according to the weather forecast, all of the snow I see in front of me will have been washed away by some rain, and we'll be heading further into spring.
Yes, before long, the crocuses are going to be crocusing all over the place, and that's a wonderful thing. So I will see you in 1 week, Barrett.
Sounds good, Chris.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.